All right, hello and welcome to the Southbound Sports Show. I'm your host, Richie Leahy, here with my co-host, Maddie B. We're going to go ahead and get right into it with high tempo. Matt, I just want to congratulate you on your first win as a head coach in the playoffs. 1-0. It's a great deal. I want to go ahead and spin us up. What happened on Saturday?
Well, we played in a swamp is what happened. We thankfully won our second home playoff game in school history. So I'm very happy and thankful that I could be a part of both of Claysburg Kimmel's home playoff games, playing two of them, winning both of them. We won a game 12-6, moving on to the next round, having a rematch against a familiar foe, Juniata Valley. And we're on the road now from this point going forward. So I like the matchup, and it should be a good game this Friday.
All right, very, very good. Good luck going forward. Hopefully you guys can get that second win. You got anything for high tempo this week? I'm
sure it's something we're going to touch on later on in the show, but the ACC Coastal Division, we kind of touched about it before. It's absolute crazy. And sitting on top of it, Pitt, surprisingly.
Yeah.
And beating Virginia, who some people thought were gonna cruise to the ACC championship game. Now Pitt sits atop of a cluttered Coastal Division with a potential to be the ACC champ.
Definitely, we're going to hit that later in the show. I have it on the big board. If you're following along at home, you can watch us live on Facebook, Southbound Sports. I also have, I'll feed into that with my high tempo, the Pac-12 South. Could be even worse than the Coastal, because right now UCLA is in the driver's seat. They would finish 6-7. So if they win the Pac-12, they would have to petition to go to the Rose Bowl. How embarrassing would that be? In Chip Kelly's first year, I mean, it would be a great step forward on how slow they started. And we had talked about it. When you get a new system, it takes a while for the quarterback to get into the groove. Usually by week 8 is what the stats have shown. And we've seen it across college football. Look, Tua's clicking right now. You have Trevor Lawrence at Clemson. You have Shea Patterson at Michigan, quarterbacks that have high efficiency in those systems. And then here you go, UCLA. You know Chip Kelly has a complex system, even though it looks simple on the outside. And they're starting to be right there. And our other boy, Herm Edwards, he could be in the championship game with a very poor record. And it's not only them, too. I'm sure we're going to talk about it when we get to the Big Ten stuff. I know last week we went high on DJ Dirk, and he's also on the big board. But the Big Ten West, right now, I think if Northwestern wins out, they would be 7-5 or something similar. So you have 3 divisions in college football that are very poor overall. So we'll see you later on in the show. We're going to get into some of the college football stuff. Let's go ahead and get into the Steel City update. I don't have anything on the Pirates, so I'll just pause here. Major League Baseball. Rick's not on the show again. We'll see if he comes back on in the future. We have free agency, basically. The Nationals offered Bryce Harper an outrageous deal, is what the ESPN had reported, and he turned it down. And this is a guy that looks like he's going to win. But if the Pirates were willing to invest, they're probably not going to get a Bryce Harper right off the bat. But you got to be able to sign guys that are on your team. I saw a lot of projections on what the Pirates are willing to spend. Still way under the league average. All I'm asking for as a fan is to pay the league average. Pay it. Because you can't be cutting guys every 3 years. So we'll see who they sign and who they bring in, but I'm not optimistic. Matt, you have anything on baseball?
I kind of just thought the same thing. I mean, you're gonna hit that point where are you taking steps? Are you doing things? And I know Rick's one that if you're going to spend the money, you need to spend it on high caliber players. And I don't know that for someone like Pittsburgh that you break the bank and you try to get one piece when there's so many other holes and things that need to be addressed that that I almost think, looking at rebuilding the Pirates is kind of the way that I look at the philosophies of teams that are building and that like rebuilding an NFL franchise. Do you go the quick route and try to just acquire the skill guys, or do you build for the long haul and start with your offense and defensive lines? I think with baseball, start with your pitching. Try to acquire the young talent, or try to trade for those pitchers now that they're going to keep you competitive in games.
That's one thing where the Pirates have tried by going across the world, trying to bring in pitchers from different countries that haven't been scouted as heavy, and bringing in guys like A.J. Burnett. But whenever you have guys, Jason Grilli, you have some of these pitchers, you kind of let them go over time, and then you see them contribute, and it just hurts whenever you trade for an Archer, someone that's on the decline over the past 5 years, and say, look, it's the best we could do, when there were other trades this summer that worked out for that team. And the Pirates were right there in the mix whenever the trades happened, and it just didn't happen. So you got to show teams you're not going to attract the biggest free agents until you are willing to spend to keep guys that are on a winning club. So let's go ahead and get into some football now. Pittsburgh Steelers split with the Ravens. It looked like early in the year the Steelers were going to struggle. Things are clicking now. They're on that level. James Conner, I'll give him a shout out. He has a ridiculous stat line. And at this point in the season, he's better than Le'Veon Bell. So I know that's the big talking point. Should we bring back Le'Veon Bell? He could be signing. He has to report by the 13th, I believe, is the date. And at this point, I don't even care. Don't play him. I'm worried right now that if you bring him back, his selfish attitude, because let's be honest, that's what it is going to cost his team and hurt the locker room. Everyone gets asked about him every post-game interview. Everyone. The press just keeps asking about him. There was reports after the game, he's writing out that he's leaving Miami, trying to draw attention to himself because he knows it's going to be a talking point. I believe I got a bunch of texts as soon as he said it. And at this point, it's like, okay, are you doing it for the team? Do you want to win games? Because I don't care about you making as much money as you can. Get some endorsements. If I have to watch one more stupid Aaron Rodgers State Farm commercial, they've been going on for 5 years. You can't tell me they don't need some fresh blood in those. Get some endorsements, Le'Veon, and make your money elsewhere. You don't have to do it only in contracts. If you get them in the commercials, guess what? You're going to have a longer career anyway, post NFL. We talked about it. I know a lot of quarterbacks usually get it, but there are guys. There was that commercial. I honestly don't know what it was for, but I remember seeing a commercial with Antonio Brown and Juju Smith-Schuster, two Steeler guys. Yeah. So why couldn't Le'Veon have been in that commercial? You get paid for commercials. So that's my take on it. Matt, you want to give any insight in that or the game itself?
I think Ramon Foster said it best. They asked him about it, and he said he's been one of the more vocal people about the issues. And he said, look, we're playing Carolina on Thursday night on a shortened week, and we really don't have a lot of time to mess with it. And I kind of like that mindset that if he's going to come. If you're not, fine. But the whole like dragging your feet and am I coming, am I not coming? To me, I think he kind of shot himself in the foot, and we've kind of said before. I think Bell was kind of hedging himself that Connor was going to struggle, and that if he was struggling early on, he could come back and he could show, well, it's not the scheme, it's not the system, it's me, that I'm worth all this extra money. Well, Connor's showing that it's not him. So now at this point, Pittsburgh has all the cards, and they can just say, no, just sit out. We'll hold your contract. We'll still give you that transition tag or whatever and trade you off to whomever and move forward from there.
Yeah, I think you're right. He thought that Connor was going to be a bust. And I'll be honest, I was messing around with some of the video games looking at Connor's stats, and it wasn't just me that thought he was slow. because, man, is he brutal in Madden before some of these roster updates. You have to think that that's what Le'Veon Bell had saw on the sideline, on the team, that he didn't have the breakaway speed, but he's made it work. And I had always thought that he would be flexible enough to be sort of if he bulked up, he could have been that power rusher that Jerome Bettis was. But he's taken it to a whole different level where he has a little bit of that, but he has some finesse, and he's able to catch the ball, which he struggled with at times. And I don't know what you would change. You already have threats downfield with the receivers and the tight ends, and the offense is clicking. Bringing in Le'Veon Bell and trying to split carries is going to be hard. I don't even know, do you work him in on third downs? Is he your new third down back? Anything the Steelers do is going to hurt Le'Veon's value. He's not getting early money now. So, and I hate talking about it. Let's go ahead and shift to the Carolina Panthers game. Like you said, Matt, it's short week, Thursday night. I hate these short week games for the team. I know it extends, so they play on Thursday, and then they'll get a full, whatever it is, 10 days rest, 8 days rest, something like that, where they have mandatory days off. So it's built in sort of like a bye. And to be honest, this comes at a pretty good time for the Steelers. You just play through the gauntlet of your division, if you want to call it that, because the Browns are in there. And you come out on top. You split with the Ravens, win one against the Bengals, and sweep the Browns. You're in the driver's seat. You have the fourth best record.
Oh, they tied with the Browns.
Oh, yeah, tied with the Browns.
They didn't get the clean sweep. So you're saying it like they blew them out, but no, they couldn't finish them off.
And you wonder why I didn't block that, or why I blocked that game out of my memory, Matt, because it was bad. So they're sitting right now fourth best record in the AFC, and they're in the driver's seat. But this game on Thursday, followed by the Jaguars, and I know this isn't the Jaguars team that beat them in the playoffs last year, but they both have mobile quarterbacks that are able to run the ball and take some hits. And that's what the Steelers have struggled with. You didn't have the speed at linebacker since Shazier's been out. Now your defense is playing, I would say, fairly well. You have a team with Cam Newton. How is this defense going to look on a short week? I mean, Cam Newton's been banged up a little bit, and I don't know if they have all their weapons. I want to say they had an injury, but I don't know off the top of my head. But it's a big game for the Steelers. What do you think the keys are this week?
I think it's just controlling the ball, controlling the clock. The thing that I really like that they did is that early on they controlled the flow of the game, got some scores, and I think that really helps them. When they can score a touchdown early on and not just field goal teams to death, I think that's one of the things that really helps Pittsburgh. Where they get themselves into a hole is when the other team gets the ball, drives it down and scores, and then they start settling for field goals or turning the ball over. Once they find themselves in a hole, it's tough for Pittsburgh to dig themselves out of it, and I think that's going to be one of the things. If they can continue to come out hot, teams start to become a lot more predictable playing them, and I think forcing them to throw then helps with the secondary.
Yeah, the tie that you reminded me of is a big key right now, because it pushes them ahead if they keep winning, but it also gives them one less win. And normally you could say in the AFC, you get that 9th win, you're pretty much a lock from the playoffs. Steelers are 4 wins away from that. So a win over Carolina and then one over Jacksonville goes a long way, because you still have to play the Bengals again, and you still have to play the Patriots. So it's definitely a key stretch now, and it's not really must win at this time, because you do have that buffer with the tie, but it should be a good game. Stop the run. I want to see some sound defense. I want to see them. I know they can stop the run, but I want to see them stop the pass when the quarterback gets mobile. Don't give up the big plays. That's what hurt them against Jacksonville last year. They moved around a little bit, and then were just dicing the Steelers apart. And it just hurts to watch that defense. So onto the might as well just go ahead and hit on my other NFL topic while we're at it. NFC. Saints. I talked bad on them, and they came out and got it done against the Rams. I thought the way they started the season, they didn't look good, but they've improved every week. We're able to take the Rams down. You saw Jared Goff. I mean, young quarterback, not 100% on his shoulders. The Rams were making moves. Did you see that the trade deadline, before they made the trade last week, they had talked to the Texans about Clowney? And they also inferred with someone else, but I forget who it was off the top of my head. But they were definitely trying to bring in pass rushing help. And, I mean, their defense is pretty stout. Could you imagine having Clowney and Aaron Donald?
And Sue.
Yeah. Their defense would be awesome. Their defensive line. So, at that point, can you put up points? The Saints were able to put up points. So give them credit. I know it was only one game, but definitely opened up the NFC, because it looked like it was the Rams up here and everybody else clear drop off. So,
well, I still think it's there. I still think that over the long haul, that the Rams are clearly the front runners there. With the stuff that McVay's doing offensively, with moving players around and doing some different things, it was a gunslinger type game. It was 45-35, but I don't know that teams can consistently do that against the Rams defense, especially when they get the defensive back they just picked up. When they get him acclimated to the system and have him fully running everything, I think that you'll see a different team come playoffs.
Yeah, the Rams are definitely putting all the chips on the table this year. They want to make that playoff run, and let's see if they can get it done. Because at the AFC, you have aging quarterbacks. If you want to build a young team, get your young quarterback some confidence, I think this could be one of the years that you do that, because when Brady and Roethlisberger retire in the AFC, you're going to have some changeover. You're dealing with the Eagles. Are they able to take that step and build a dynasty, or are they going to be a one-off like the Packers are with Aaron Rodgers? You get that one Super Bowl early, and then it's all hype from there. So let's go ahead and shift into NHL talk, because we forgot it last week. I said I'd come back to it, and I never did. But Penguins right now on a 4-game losing streak. And I might as well check in on some of the trades. Jack Johnson. I'm going to call him out because he has been awful. And
funny that you say that.
Go ahead. What do you have?
Well, just you're saying that, and I thought he was supposed to be like the savior that was supposed to help the defense out. And clearly those issues that we talked about with not having they thought signing him and bringing him in was going to resolve some of the issues with the defensive play, but there's still just there's no defense. It's like everyone wants to push the puck down the ice and be the offensive goal scorers, but no one's playing defense, and they're just getting shelled.
Yeah, they put him on the line with Letang last night. I think it was last night, and it still didn't do anything. So I looked at the stats, and I think he's -7 right now. And I went back through his career. He's -116 for his career. He had one good year in Columbus. Was it 2 years ago now? So I don't know if they were trying to build on that hype, thinking that if they surrounded him with the top caliber player that the Penguins had, that he would be able to come in and play at that high level. But it's not working right now. So I hate to call out a player this early, but just watching the games has been tough. 4-game losing streak. They were last week when we skipped, Penguins were in first in the division. Now they dropped to second. So got to get your lines fixed. I know we always talk about, let's see what happens in January when you hit that January stretch, getting into the groove for the playoffs. But I got to get some of these lines figured out and get some type of defense going. Other big news, not really Pittsburgh related, NHL expansion. I missed this last week. So the NHL has approved Seattle preliminarily, but whatever that word is, as they had like an owner's vote or whatever. So now they're opening it up in December to the league offices to bring in Seattle as a 32nd city. I think they've been in talks to hire a coach. I don't know if that happened, if they're able to do that yet or not. But what are your thoughts on that, Matt?
I think it's good. It balances out the league. If they want to try to open the markets up a little bit more, I don't see it being that big of an issue. With the Seattle market, it may be good for the league and trying to expand it. I think we kind of talked before when they brought Vegas in. At the time, it seemed like an odd move because they weren't bringing a second team with it, so it was leaving the league lopsided. So maybe that bringing them in will help balance that out.
Well, I have some thoughts on this, and I know we might have talked about them a couple years ago when they did bring in Vegas, but the rumors have always been to bring in another team in Canada. You get a team in Canada, but some of the cities that they floated around are all on the east side. And the one thing that I hated, and I don't know if, I know we have some Red Wings fans that listen to this, I don't know if they agree, but Red Wings used to be in the West. I loved the move to get them into the East because most of their other leagues in the AL, they're in the Central. For Major League Baseball, I mean. So the Tigers are in the Central. They play the Indians. They play, who else is in that division? The Royals, Minnesota. So it's a very regional pod. Same with the NFL. They're in the NFC North, the Lions. They have the Packers, the Bears. Then you get to hockey, and they're playing West Coast teams all through the 90s. They're battling out with Colorado. And the travel just has to be horrendous. I know they had some great teams out there, but they're not playing those teams from the area. You move them into the East, I know they really don't have the same type of teams that are in that same vicinity, but you have Columbus, you have Pittsburgh, some other ones that are really close that they're playing in more of what their market is. They're on the Eastern time. Out West, you're always playing 3 hours behind, an hour, 2 hours behind. Keep them in the East. That's one of the priorities I always thought, because if you bring in another Eastern team, what other team would there be to move to the West? It looked like it was Detroit or bust. I think the original, which owner was talking about moving their team? Was it Arizona? Because they had talked about moving Arizona, and they had told him that if you move the franchise up to the eastern side of Canada, you're going to have to stick in the Western Division, because they didn't want that shift back with Detroit. So if they go with Seattle, I'm glad that it's not going to shift everything back to a weird alignment. So I don't know. You have any other thoughts on that?
Well, the only other thing, and I don't know too much about Canada, but if they were gonna go that route, is there a bigger Canadian city on the western side of Canada, or is that all just like wide open area?
Are you trying to make us look like idiots, Matt?
I'm just saying I don't know enough about Canada.
We have Vancouver. Vancouver's over there because they had the basketball team on the west that they had moved down to Memphis. Is that who turned into the Memphis Grizzlies?
Yeah.
I think it's more like our Midwest, where it's kind of like flyover. The middle section of Canada, where most of the bigger stuff is near the ports or the Great Lakes, like Toronto. But I don't know. Without looking at a map, I just don't know offhand. If there is another city.
I know we do, as we're looking, and especially with the XFL coming back and the Arena League coming back, a big part of that is the marketing aspect. And so I guess it makes more sense to keep it stateside and to push where you have the more media exposure here in America versus going to Canada.
I'll add right in on that. And I think now, back when these leagues, remember, they started 100 years ago. Teams would travel by train. Your whole baseball team would have to hop on a train to get to the next city and then play a baseball game and then take the train back. It's a totally different time. And I think that adding more teams is actually better. I was just talking to a friend of mine today about the NHL blackout rules. I hate that, because if I'm going to go ahead and get NHL TV and I want to watch the Penguins and they're a successful franchise, I have to deal with a good third of their games always blacked out. So I have to pay for cable. And I think when you're saying the XFL and arena football, for them to really make a splash, I think they're thinking too small, too olden days, where they only have 4 teams and that's what they're going to do. I think they should go opposite and try to get as many teams as they can and do like a March Madness style tournament. There are so many cities that are kind of abandoned by some of these sports. Think of like minor league baseball, where you could really draw in, and they tried it with the XFL last time by bringing in a city in Alabama. Was it Birmingham? You could do that. Charge like maybe don't even try to get it on network television. Try to get it on Netflix, because Netflix they would love to get into the live advertising market, and people are already paying $10 a month. You could watch your favorite teams. If there's a team here in Raleigh that's going to play more of a regional rivalry with someone maybe in Charlotte, just because there's so many teams. Pittsburgh, you have Cleveland. Throw a team in maybe State College, Harrisburg. Teams that you can drive and see, and just play them in pods. And I would like to see that on a grand scale. Maybe the XFL isn't able to do that, but Arena League's been around for forever. I think that's what they should do, is consolidate. The league that might end up doing it is going to be Major League Soccer. They've been doing through the expansion things kind of like the holdovers, but we had talked about relegation and promotion. You could even throw in a mix like that. Get some of these smaller cities and get some excitement, because if there's a team that's near me that I can go see for $10, I'm going to be more inclined to watch it on TV. It's going to be hard for these newer teams to break into that television market. And like even Seattle, big market, their fans, do they watch hockey? How many of them are Vancouver fans? I don't know how far of a drive that is. I mean, these are legitimate questions. If they haven't watched hockey before, are they going to make time out of their schedule? It didn't work for basketball. 82 games, same season length. So, anything else on that? Get it back into college football?
Nah, let's get back into the bread and butter.
All right. You mentioned it earlier. Pitt leads the Coastal. They beat Virginia last week. And I'll be honest, Virginia was ranked. And for some reason, since Pitt didn't get it done versus Notre Dame, I knew they were going to win. Narduzzi has them play at the level of their opponents. He's always been able to do that. Doesn't matter who they play. They go ahead. They beat Clemson. They beat Penn State. They were in the game. Whatever Penn State fans say, Pitt was in that game this year at halftime. You get him to come out. Now, does he make the adjustments? Does he have the depth or the athletes to compete for a full game? Sometimes he gets it done. Sometimes he doesn't. Notre Dame this year fell short. But Virginia, he made sure that he got it done. And now they're in the driver's seat. They played Virginia Tech this week. And if they beat Virginia Tech, they hold tiebreakers over both Virginia and Virginia Tech. And they're the teams that are right now in second. I think they're tied for second. One of them might be a game behind. But Pitt then goes to Wake Forest and then Miami. All they would have to do at that point is to win one more. I don't think the 7-way tie is in play anymore, or whatever it was we talked about a few weeks ago. But Pitt's in the driver's seat, and this is the year that they can get it done. Because right now, Penn State, they're on a slide right now. And I know we're going to get into Big Ten in a while, but if Pitt really wants to make that jump, this is the year. This is the year they can get into that conference championship game and try to gain recruiting ground. Ohio State sliding. They could very well turn around and win out and make the national championship, but right now they look like they are going to be in for a battle against Michigan State. If Ohio State's not in their championship game, Penn State's not in the championship game, but Pitt is, they should be able to pick up some of that recruiting ground, and that right now is Narduzzi's weakness. So what do you think going forward? What do you think their chances are?
Well, the optimist says that they have a shot, but being raised in a Pitt household, I know that the doom is impending. they're gonna end up stubbing their toe against someone, and I don't know if it's gonna be this week or if it'll be down the road. But they will do something to shoot themselves in the foot between now and then. I was thinking of Pitt football. I was thinking, are they able to compete with a Florida State, a Clemson, even within the division, the Virginia Techs? Typically, I would say no, because as they entered like the fraud Graham era, where they were talking about trying to go with their high octane offense, I don't know that they could recruit that type of athlete consistently to win at Pitt. Now, I think if Narduzzi focuses more on a style similar to Paul Christ, where he's looking to recruit more heavier linemen, tight end type sets, that I think Pitt could become more flexible with. I think they could realistically become more competitive in the ACC. I mean, they're sitting atop the Coastal now, but I'm thinking bigger picture, trying to get them to see what do you need to do to take the next step, and I think that's where they need to be. Instead of trying to play Clemson's game or playing Florida State's game that they're not going to win. They're not going to pick up the Southern, like the Florida recruits or the Georgia recruits that are going to have that speed base for them. I think Pitt needs to just focus in on the lineman aspect, the tight ends, and play that power football that Wannstedt was pushing while he was there.
That's exactly what I was going to bring up. The Dave Wannstedt era, Pitt was top 10 for a while there. I don't think they've ever finished the season that high, but they're running a pro style, and it works. You can get it done. And at this point, I think they can add spread elements. You can't tell me that if Pitt would want to run similar to the offense that Michigan is running right now, that they couldn't get it done and be successful in the ACC. It's a run-first offense. It's modern enough that you can bring out the spread elements. You can run read option, break off 50-yard runs every so often. But when it comes down to it, when you need to just power through and run over the opponent, you can get it done. I think that's what's held Wisconsin back. They're stuck in just the power. But whenever they need to make that jump to come back or score, they don't have the deep threats. They don't have that quarterback that can take them to that second level. Then you look on the other hand at Penn State. They've shifted too far the other way. And I don't think Pitt needs to do that to win, and we'll talk about that in a little bit here. Pitt needs to get into that mix because right now they don't want to become a Duke or name another team, Wake Forest in the ACC, that runs primarily some type of spread offense, even Louisville, because when push comes to shove, right now they're similar pro style. They're able to win against the big boys, which you can do because you can run 3 or 4, maybe up to 20 different looks from the same formation in that pro style that spread you usually don't. You have 1 or 2 reads. It's quick. And whenever time comes, you can get a big lead. But if you can't run the clock out, what are you going to do? I mean, Pitt tried to add some of those elements when they upset Penn State. They did a lot of the pass underneath, quick little screens, and it worked well. You need to get back to that. You need to do that. They didn't pull that out against Penn State this year, and I was waiting for them to do it. Like, come on. 2 years ago, you tried it in Beaver Stadium, and you almost pulled that game out. What's happening? Do you not have the athletes? Because if you don't show that, it's kind of like the rabbit and the egg, or whatever. The chicken and the egg. Whenever you have, okay, we're going to run this stuff, but we don't have the athletes to do it. But if you don't show them, then you're not going to be able to recruit those athletes. So you're stuck at square one.
Yeah, and I think what's hurting, like, and that was the reason that I was thinking, well, they have to go back to the pro set. Not necessarily the predictable eye, but the shifting, the kind of smoke and mirrors that Canada was running when he was there. And I think there's elements of it that still are present with Pitt, but I just don't know that they're 100% confident with that scheme, because I think you only have so much practice time a week, and so you got to figure out what are you going to hang your hat on. And outside of Georgia Tech, the rest of the ACC is in the spread. So for a team like Pitt, they can they can create their own identity by being more of a power run team, and then it gives them the element of they're running something different compared to the rest of their opponents. So it's something that other teams are going to have to figure out ways to prepare for it and game plan around it, that I think might give them an edge. And it may help in the recruiting aspect too, that they can show a different style of offense that's putting players in the NFL and keep those local kids at home and not bleed them out to other programs.
Well, that's something that Michigan State did. And Narduzzi was part of that Michigan State program that went to the Rose Bowl, that I think he had left before they made the college football playoffs. But they had built their recruiting base. Michigan had shifted with Rich Rod to the spread, and they said, guys that are playing pro in the state of Michigan and Ohio, come see us. Ohio State and Michigan, they're shifting, come to us, and they were able to build their entire program off those leftovers. Pitt's in the same situation right now. Who borders them? West Virginia, spread. Penn State, their read spread stuff they're running right now. Ohio State, Urban Meyer's definitely spread. Fill them in. The only downside is now you have Michigan and Michigan State both running power. Maryland's kind of shifted. They have Matt Canada now, so they're kind of running it. And look what happened to them. They upset Texas. And is it even an upset when they beat Texas 2 years in a row? Texas hasn't beat them. Texas is running that high-powered spread, and Maryland, with the lesser athletes, are able to come in, control the clock, get a lead, play sound defense and special teams, and get a win. Can they compete with other bigger schools? Maybe not all the time, but that's what Pitt's at right now.
With what I'm seeing from the spread now, I think one of the issues that you're having is that a lot of these teams are so much more spread to run, and it's basically just spread them out and have a more athletic quarterback. It almost goes back to like old time single wing football where you just took your best athlete, put them at running back, snapped it right to them, and just let them run. It's essentially what a lot of these teams are doing. So you have certain teams that they have these they're running a spread offense, but they're not really throwing the ball well. And I mean, you could even use Florida State as an example. They're in a spread, but they're not the quarterback. They haven't been using the quarterback runs as well as they should have, and it's absolutely crippling their offense and production.
Yeah, and another team I'll point out there is Iowa. They've built their offense around that traditional pro, but like you're saying, they've been throwing all kind of weird wrinkles in where they're snapping it to the slot guy, like an underhand snap that then Mike Leach runs the next week. They're running all kind of misdirections and stuff that you can do from a pro set because you have that personnel out there. The defense has to be in their set defense. They're not ready for you to throw these extra elements in, and it's able to win games. Now, I wouldn't say this year, but 2 years ago when they went undefeated in the regular season, or I think it was 2 years, maybe 3 years ago now, you're able to do that. And that's what I think Pitt could do. Some of the smaller teams, I'll use Rutgers as another example. When Schiano built them up, they were running more pro style. He jumped right into the NFL. They got away from that, and now look what the scores are. I mean, the Michigan's playing them this week, and the spread's already 39. So you're looking at that, and you're thinking, about what happened? You can't match up now. Now they can't even run the ball to try to control the clock, and you're playing the number one defense in the country. So what's the upside to that spread now?
The other part to that is you got to look at the teams like for where Rutgers is or where Pitt's trying to build towards. I think that the model to follow is, in some aspects, Mike Leach. Maybe you don't follow the air raid philosophy or that style, but he looked at his personnel and basically he threw the ball like an insane amount of time when he started at Washington State. And as they've gotten better, he's been a little bit more honest with those earlier teams and was like, hey, I had to throw because we didn't have NCAA Division I caliber offensive linemen on a roster. Our offensive line was so bad that if the quarterback didn't catch the ball out of the shotgun and throw it, he was getting murdered. So kind of seeing that as he was building his team and saying, well, taking the skill set of the players that he has on roster and trying to find things within his own philosophy to make it work. And now that he has the recruiting base there, now he's having a lot more success with his air raid offense.
And he's able to move the ball because you don't have to hand it off if that's not your style. He's able to do those design runs, and we talked about this 2 or 3 weeks ago, where he's throwing in little screens, quick screens, that are basically runs by the running back that are getting 8-9 yards a pop. And then you're starting in second and short, which then opens everything up in your playbook.
Which is it's great that you say that, because that was just a conversation that I had with my own quarterback this week. You know, when we're breaking down film, I said it helps. It gives you more confidence throwing the ball quick on the perimeter, and it gets the ball to our athletes out in space. Why try to run it into the middle of 7-8 man box when you can throw it outside and still gain 4 or 5 yards and get ahead of the sticks?
Yeah, definitely agree. I just keep thinking back to that Pitt Penn State game where Pitt upset them, running that kind of stuff, all kind of screens, and that's what they need to go back to. Maybe it was Matt Canada. I don't know. The other big game in the ACC, Boston College, or Clemson at Boston College, I should say. I didn't realize this, but if Boston College wins, they're in the driver's seat for the ACC championship game. And I'm thinking, if Pitt wins the Coastal, they're going to have to play Clemson. Could you imagine a championship game between Pitt and Boston College? The old Big East come to life at that point. And, I mean, have we really seen Clemson on the road? They played, Texas A&M early? This is going to be a cold game. These Southern teams don't come to the North. I mean, that's set in there. So what's your prediction on that game?
I really like Clemson right now. I mean, they're absolutely throttling teams. It seems like their quarterback situation settled. He's settling in, and I really just like what they have going on as a program. So I think, to me, they're one of the 4 teams that I have penciled in as of right now for the college football playoff. I think they're in it.
I think you're right. I try to go ahead and create some controversy. They're going north, but right now, I think there's 3 teams that are playing absolutely lights out right now, and that's Alabama, Clemson, and Michigan. And you can rank those any way that you want. I know Notre Dame has played some close games. They haven't improved week to week like those 3 teams. And I think those are your best bets right now to get to the playoffs. And I'll use that as a segue now into the Big Ten. Michigan played, or I'll leave my prediction. I think Clemson wins. I think it's going to be a closer game than what they've been playing, but they've been playing complete blowouts. So, I mean, that could be anything from like 31-17, which is what I'm thinking that game's going to end up being. So, and speaking of that, before we even get to the Big Ten, even though I already switched our thing, Notre Dame, Florida State. Do you think Florida State has a chance?
It depends on which quarterback. It's rumored that DeAndre Francois had a concussion, and he might be able to go. He went in the media today and said that if he's healthy, he's QB1. But I don't know. With Blackman thrown for 400 yards, he looked okay. They weren't able to pull the win out, but to me, I liked what Blackman brings to the table. I think he has a better command of the offense. I think he needs to be the quarterback going forward, even if that means Francois pieces out on the team.
Yeah, last time I predicted Florida State to do well, they got killed by Clemson. Then they get killed by NC State. I'm just worried that the locker room is lost. When you lose that veteran leadership, you have to kind of wait for them to all leave the program. And I think that's where Florida State's at right now. I was hoping this would be a closer game because if you want the Big Ten to make the playoffs, a Notre Dame loss makes Ohio State and Michigan look that much better. I mean, you already have Michigan. If you're Michigan, you already have a quality loss over undefeated Notre Dame. If they have one loss and you're a conference champ, and that was one touchdown week 1 at their stadium, I think you jump Notre Dame. They just need that to pick up that loss late in the season, and they play Florida State. Then they play, I think, Syracuse at a neutral site game in New York, maybe, and then USC. And all of those teams are kind of lost boats right now, floating around the ocean. Maybe Syracuse has the best bet. I'm going to say Notre Dame rules in this one. So, I did want to bring that up, though, because it got into the Big Ten. I want to give a shout-out to Michigan offensive line coach Ed Warner. First year in the program, and you can tell that we talked about this when you talked about Pitt and them able to run the ball consistently. His offensive line has improved every week to the point where they're just manhandling teams. The last 3 weeks, they've rushed for more yards than the defense has given up total. Just rushing. And that was against Michigan State, Wisconsin, and Penn State, which a lot of the pundits out there predicted Michigan to go 1-2 during that stretch. They're just dominating them. And I actually looked him up. He doesn't have a Wikipedia page. So I did some digging. Was it 2008 with Eric Mangini? Kansas went to the Orange Bowl. Guess who their offensive coordinator was? Ed Warner. Mangino. Whatever. I get those guys confused because they both didn't win shit. So, but
Mangino offensive coordinator he was the guy that took over when Leach went to Texas Tech.
Was he? I don't even remember.
He has a national championship with Big Game Bob.
Oh wow, you might be right. I think I did know that. But Ed Warner was there when they won. He was their offensive coordinator when they went to the Orange Bowl. And I think, did they win that Orange Bowl? I don't remember. Then, when Mangino gets fired, he floats around, ends up at Notre Dame. Guess who's their offensive line coach when they go undefeated, 2012? Good old Ed Warner. Then, 2014, he took a job at Ohio State. Guess what they did with that offensive line? If you remember that offensive line that pushed around Bama in the playoffs, won a national championship, he's the coach. So everywhere this guy has coached, he's coached offensive lines that have either went undefeated or made it to bigger heights at their program. Kansas, at a point. He gets pushed out of Ohio State. I think he was at Minnesota. PJ Fleck, they had Minnesota that year that they took Penn State to the wire. The year Saquon Barkley, I think, had that big run. They won the Big Ten. Penn State, he was at Minnesota that year. So you have an offensive line coach that comes in. That was the weakness for Michigan. And they're manhandling guys. And they only have one senior on that line. So most of this line returns next year. So at this point, I don't see why Penn State, if you're Penn State and you're some of these other Big Ten teams, I don't understand why they went completely to a system of read spread. Because when they play teams like Pitt, and who else did they struggle with this year? Illinois. They can't run the ball to put them away to save their life. And whenever they do, remember, they had a 2-touchdown lead against Ohio State. Blew it because they couldn't run the ball. They had a lead against Michigan State. Blew it because they couldn't run the ball and keep the clock moving. Why can't other teams focus? I think that's what the weak point is with Penn State right now. If I'm giving a fair analysis, Rick got on me last week saying that I was too confident going into that game. How could I not be confident? James Franklin is 1-4 against Michigan now. He lost to Brady Hoke. Their only win was the big win that, of course, Herb Street brought up maybe 50 times during the game on Saturday, and he's been slipping because I brought it up after that Ohio State-Purdue game, Kirk Herbstreit. He basically was almost crying on air when Purdue kept scoring, making excuses about Urban Meyer. And then on Saturday, he really wanted Michigan to lose. You could just hear it in his voice. Every time something big would play, he would be like, Trace McSorley had a guy wide open. He just needed to make that throw. And you can just tell that he wanted them to score. But it didn't happen. And for some reason, he kept saying, this game's not over. It was fourth quarter. I remember that Michigan had like a 35-0 lead. He said, this game's not over. Remember Penn State, they scored 42 last year. And I looked at the clock. There's like 8 minutes left. And whoever's hosting with them is either Reese Davis or Chris Fowler. I texted you guys, like, what's Herb Street talking about? The guy laughed and he's like, Kirk, you mean Penn State might score once in this game? Because this game is already over. Like, what are you talking about? Scoring 42 last year doesn't make a lick of a difference because that was a different team completely. And last year, just to prove the point, they ran Michigan down. Michigan was getting 3 and outs. They had a backup quarterback in, couldn't carry the ball. That game was 14-13 late in the second. Penn State scores right before halftime. They only have a 21-13 lead. But because they were able to wear out the Michigan defense and Michigan's offense couldn't get off the field or couldn't stay on the field, Penn State just kept running and they kept scoring and they kept scoring. And that was the downfall for Penn State. A lot of people were mad at the way Michigan danced around, copied Penn State's celebrations. But Penn State was running the ball. They didn't take a knee last year. Franklin was really trying to run the score up. So, he deserved what coming to him. He 100% deserved it. Was Michigan running the score up this year? Were they passing a lot? No. Did they take a knee? I think they did. So, no. But man, was that an ass kicking. I told you Don Brown said that he had that game circled. I know you had your own game. Did you even watch any of it?
Actually, as a team, we watched a real little bit of it. We tried to keep ourselves in our pregame, ritual team meal, and we started watching a little bit of it, and then we had to start getting ready for our own game. But did catch a little bit. For as much as I've complained to you about Michigan's offense, they're in a position now where win out. Don't choke against Ohio State, because that can make Urban Meyer's year is beating Michigan and keeping you guys out of the playoffs. You guys losing at this point is gonna be the back door that will put Alabama in if they happen to lose to Georgia in the SEC championship.
Oh, I agree. And I was watching it and trying to see what was going to happen. And just by taking Herb Street's voice and the way he was broken down, I would say, and this is a big point that I'm taking away from the Big Ten and why I think the NCAA should step in and have refs across the board. I felt like in 2016, the Big Ten wanted Ohio State to win because they thought they had the best chance to advance in the playoffs. They marked that spot. There were a couple other shoddy calls in that game that went to overtime. Michigan lost on that 4th down replay call that really looked like he was stopped. They didn't have a good view of it. So now this is the first year in what? 20, 24, 25 years? I mean, it's been a long, long time. 2006, I don't think they cared. That Michigan-Ohio State game that was settled by a field goal or whatever. There was a late targeting call or something that could have been controversial, but it's hard to think back. But other than that, I think Ohio State was favored in almost every game that Michigan played except for the one that they lost, 2011. So this is the first year in a long time that it's looking like they might end up getting the calls. And how much of a difference does that make on the road? They haven't played well on the road. Let's be honest. They have a tune-up game this week at Rutgers. And let's be honest, they haven't beat Indiana that convincingly the last couple of years. They went to overtime, I think, twice. So you got to take care of business. I'm not even worried about Ohio State at this point. If they beat Rutgers, which I'm not really worried about them, you got to take care of business at Indiana. That's the trap game. It's like the Big Ten kind of shifted their schedules around. And I saw this posted by a Penn State fan after the game. They said that over the next 4 years, Penn State has to play Michigan, Michigan State, and Ohio State in 3 out of 4 weeks. So they basically have to almost play them back-to-back all 4 years. Michigan doesn't have to do that ever. Ohio State, I think they said, does that twice. So the Big Ten has really shifted around Michigan's schedule because if you remember, these breakdowns at the end of the year were because they were traveling to Iowa. They were traveling to Wisconsin and then playing Ohio State. So that's shifted around. This year has set up, even though they're on the road, you got to take care of business. I mean, the other big game this week is Michigan State and Ohio State. So I'd like to get your pick on that one. Ohio State has to travel to Michigan State. They struggled with Nebraska. Scott Frost almost got his signature win. Almost got it.
Yeah, Ohio State, I don't know what to make of them at this point because Urban Meyer is having health issues. It's this. I feel like it's the same bad song that we heard from Florida. It's setting the table for why we couldn't make the college football playoff. Well, it was because he had all these issues, because of the suspension, because of this, because of that. And I don't know. I think that they're going to end up winning it, but I don't know that they're going to, just because I think they have more athletes. They're just going to end up out-athleting them is what it's going to come down to. I don't know that it's scheme. I think that there's still deficiencies with the defensive coordinator and issues that they've been having that I don't know that scheme-wise that's there. I think it's just they're lining up and just playing better because there's better guys on that side of the ball.
I agree. I think the only two teams that come close in talent, and we had already talked about, Ohio State has the number one talent. According to 24/7 Sports, they're the recruiting database. They do composites. Ohio State has the most talented roster this year. Have they been underperforming? Oh, hell yeah. They shouldn't be getting killed by Purdue. That just shouldn't happen. So you're looking at a team that has looked all out of sorts. I think the thing that everyone's overlooking right now is Haskins. Haskins hasn't been able to effectively run the ball. In fact, Ohio State can't really run the ball at all. A lot of people think that they turned it around against Nebraska. That was all at the end of the game when Nebraska's depth was depleted and they were gassed. Ohio State just ran it down their throat and won that game. If Nebraska had any depth, they would have got the ball back at the end of the game with a chance to win. They just couldn't stop Ohio State. I think Frost should have kicked an onside kick. I understand his thought process. Well, we have enough time. All we need is to stop them. But when Ohio State just runs for a couple first downs, your defense is tired. So you kind of have to make that decision. Maybe they hadn't practiced it. I don't know what the situation is. Up against Michigan State, though, they can pull all kind of rabbits out of hats. They can win. Random games you don't expect them to win. The big thing is Felton Davis. He's out with that. Was it Achilles that just broke against Michigan, ruptured, a non-contact injury, which you hate to see. He was their deep threat. He was the guy that called for the ball against Penn State, went down and won it for them. That is who needs to be on the field. They don't have him. Another guy, L.J. Scott, their stud running back. He played in the Michigan game. I thought he was back. He didn't play last week. So is he really going to be there? These are the type of guys that you need if, like you said, you're going up against Ohio State's athletes. Are your top players going to play? We know Davis is out. Is L.J. Scott out? I just don't think they have enough right now. Their quarterback situation's weird this year. They don't have the Connor Cook, the Kirk Cousins. They don't have that star quarterback that can control the game. They just don't. So I think Ohio State wins it, and I think it sets up the big showdown in the Horseshoe in a few weeks. So let's see. Other thing on the Big Ten real quick. DJ Durkin, he was fired. And I know we had some people tell us that it looks like we were wrong on that because we spent a lot of time on this last week. I don't think we were wrong per se. We were going by what they had reported. I thought that if they were bringing DJ Durkin back, they needed to do some public relations with it. You need to say, hey, DJ Durkin's going across and he is doing, he's going to go through all these classes. He's going to do this, this, and this. They didn't do any of that. They brought him back. Matt, I think you said that they should just bring him back like they did. And too much backlash. There's a players' fight the next day. They beat up one of the whistleblowers, they said. And now that's being looked into as a criminal matter.
Well, I think that's inevitably what led to the firing, is when you have that much backlash and that much of an outroar that it gives the justification of the green light to get rid of them.
Oh, at this point, I thought they should have promoted Matt Canada. I think I mentioned it last week, but at this point, you have to clean house completely. Completely. Because if that's the environment, he comes back for one day and there's fights. Matt Kennedy, you did an awesome job. If you want to be a head coach, you're going to get it this year. You beat Texas, interim. You have the worst situation in college football. This would be like someone going to Baylor that year that they completely tanked and they haven't recovered from, and winning and beating Texas.
Yeah.
That's basically what he did. You got to give him credit. I think he gets a job. I don't. To be honest, if I'm Rutgers, I'm trying to hire him because Chris Ash isn't getting it done. I mean, this guy just won games against Texas in some of the Big Ten games. I think Big Ten has records like 2 wins or something, but he's competed with complete sanctions basically this season. A fractured locker room, all kind of weird stuff. I just don't know. But I wanted to bring it up. He was actually fired since we talked about it. I still think they could have kept him if they did the PR stuff. You can't just say he's back. He's back on Saturday. And then rule him out there because you knew it was going to be lambs to the slaughter. The way social media and everything works, you basically have to stretch it out for a week. You put him on like they did with Urban Meyer. You put it on a 3-week suspension. Suspend him until the bowl game. That was only 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and it ease him back in. That's what they did with Urban Meyer, and guess what? That backlash ran out of steam.
But I also wonder, behind the scenes too, how much people were saying, if we don't pull for Canada, that he's going to end up leaving at the end of this year, and he's doing a good job. You know, is he doing a better job now than what Durkins has been able to do up to that point? You know, and I think given the disaster that he's been in, Canada's held his own, and probably is the better hire.
Oh, it's 100%. If they wanted a clean break, they could have had it. They could have just fired him. But let's be honest, it just comes across that they're cheap. They didn't want to spend the money. And
well, maybe it's the same way that we're looking in reverse of Le'Veon Bell, where Bell waited out and it bit him in the ass. They were like, we'll suspend Durkin and we'll let Canada try it. And then if he sucks, we can still bring Durkin back and be like, look, we have to save our coach. We have to save our program.
And then it didn't work because Canada's winning. And then they're like, oh, shit. Can we get out of this contract? And the lawyer says, no, this is the dumbest contract I've ever seen a university sign. They had to pay him within 60 days, like a bulk of that contract. I heard that they had talked to some boosters, and boosters were like, nah, we ain't paying that. And then after the backlash, one of them stepped up. I don't want to speculate, but I think it was one of the academic boosters, like someone that actually did a lot of the academic side, because they thought that's what was hurting. To have this guy around, you're gonna lose students. You're gonna lose. Look what happened in Missouri. They had issues a few years ago, and they're renting out their dorms during football games as hotels to recoup some of the money because student enrollment dropped. Is that true? I don't know. There were some other things too that were floating around that they weren't really sure. There wasn't an autopsy, so they didn't have conclusive evidence that would either clear the trainer or crucify him. They didn't get that last piece of evidence. And that was the family's request. What is the school supposed to do if that's what happened? And I don't know for sure. I saw that they put out some reports, but I didn't read through all of them. So it's a weird situation. The Big Ten's a mess. And I'll finish it up right before we get into the college football rankings here before the end of the show. The Big Ten West, I mentioned it earlier. Northwestern, if they win 2 games, I think they clinch. And they just need Iowa and Wisconsin, I think, to lose once and they clinch. And Iowa's going to have to finish with a tough Northwestern, or tough Nebraska, I mean. So all Northwestern has to do is basically win 1 week, and they could be in the championship game with a poor record. They lost to Notre Dame last week, so it didn't really hurt them. They're still in the driver's seat. And it's going to be a mess. Is this the first year, possibly, as we shift here into the college football rankings, is this the first year where we see one of those top teams lose in their conference championship game? We haven't seen it in the playoff era. So you have Alabama, Georgia, like you mentioned earlier, if one of them loses, that's the SEC championship game, folks. It's the only one that's locked up. The toughest conference in the land already has their championship game locked up, Matt. Georgia versus Alabama. Punch that ticket. Wow, how could that be? I'm so shocked. You would think that conference would come down to the wire with, like, a big game Thanksgiving weekend at noon on ABC. Oh, wait, that's the Big Ten. So you have SEC. It's already locked up. Alabama. They could lose to Auburn. Wouldn't matter. I think what happens is if they lose to Auburn, who else they play? Mercer? Some other lame schools they're not actually going to lose to. And someone else. If they lose one of these games, it's kind of like a mulligan. Like, we got you. You got to drop one. Is Alabama great? I don't know. LSU, they said they had a defense, but you can have the best defense in the world, but if the offense can't get you guys off the field, how do we know? Alabama just wore that defense down. It was, 9-0? I said, are we sure that this is a great Alabama team? And then LSU just tired and got blown out. So we'll see. They'll play Georgia, and I would hate, like you said, Alabama to lose in the SEC championship game and back their way in. And there's a couple different ways that could happen. Because you said it could come at the expense of Michigan, but if Michigan loses, they deserve to be out at this point because they already had their loss against Notre Dame. I would hate for it to come at the expense of Mike Leach. Let's say one of those teams loses, Clemson, Michigan, or Notre Dame, and Washington State's right there. Alabama loses and they get in over Washington State. I'd be disappointed. And that's probably an understatement.
But I almost think when you look at the Big 12, and I know that they had Oklahoma in it last year, but you look at the Big 12 and you look at the Pac-10 or Pac-12 or whatever they are now. I think it's Pac-12. Look at those two conferences, and they're almost like a lower tier. They're a Power 5, but they're like a second-rate Power 5 because I don't know that like they're taken as serious. Because how do you? That's the only way that you look at justifying putting two SEC teams in. And if everything stands the way that it does and everyone runs the table, and you have Clemson as a conference champion, an undefeated Notre Dame, a one-loss conference champion in Michigan, and then you have Alabama and Georgia, that winner is obviously going to get a seat at the table. Does that one-loss team, if Georgia happens to beat Alabama, which I think they could, I think they're built in the same mold that Alabama is, does that leave Alabama out?
I think if those teams that you mentioned win, Alabama's out. I know they'll have one loss. At that point, it would be their resume against Michigan's, and Alabama doesn't have that many ranked wins. They would finish what? 2-1, 1-1. I don't know at that point. I will mention that the new rankings are out. Alabama's 1, Clemson's 2, and Notre Dame's 3. Michigan is 4. But here's where you get the kicker. Georgia's 5. They're right there ready to move up if they beat Alabama. Oklahoma's 6. Guess who's 7?
Should be UCF.
Oh, it's LSU, baby.
But it's not.
It's LSU. So you're.
Well, why wouldn't it be?
Why would it be? LSU. They beat. And I did see an ESPN thing where they were saying that LSU and Georgia had a good case against Michigan because they both played the same number of ranked teams. It was like 4 and 5 or something like that. And LSU had one more loss compared to Michigan. But then they went and said that it really only comes down to, because of the losses, Georgia and Michigan. And they said, well, Michigan has the better strength of schedule, and they have beat more teams with winning records. And so they said, based on that, Georgia has the better computer ranking. For no reason. They said in the same exact article that Michigan had the better stats, the better strength of schedule, and the better opponent win record. And they still have their computer saying that Georgia should have been third. It just doesn't make any sense. It's a clear bias. I think actually one of the guys from CNN I don't know if you saw this. I can't remember the guy's name. I don't watch CNN. But a guy came on ESPN, was it Game Day or something over the weekend? And I didn't watch that one because the Big Ten tailgate was at Michigan, Penn State, so I watched that one instead. But I think it was a Game Day where he came on and talked trash about the SEC being overrated, and they had him apologize. CNN had him apologize for making fun of the SEC. It's the most outrageous thing that I've ever seen. If all the facts are there and they just want to push these teams in, I think that's when you'd really see the split. If ESPN really wants to kill their model, go ahead and push the Big Ten out. Because if the Big Ten leaves like they had threatened to do before, and leaves
that's
with
what they're going to set the table for, because look at how lopsided the top 25 is with SEC schools.
Well, like I'm saying, you're right. And Washington State is 8th, and then followed by West Virginia, and then 10th is Ohio State. Guess who's next? Kentucky. How the hell is Kentucky ahead of UCF? You can't give me a good reason for that. Kentucky has played no one. They don't play anyone in the non-conference because they have that tough crossover Louisville game for their 9th game. So they play 3 cupcakes and then 9 games. Big 12, the Big 10, and the Pac-12 all play 9 conference games. So Kentucky basically gets one freebie, and they took advantage of it this year. And now they're going to be ranked near the top 10 for absolutely no reason. So, I mean, what's going to happen? They have Michigan State ranked. They have Iowa ranked from the Big Ten. And Penn State.
I tell you what, even looking, you have Florida at 15, 6-3. But Mississippi State is up there.
6-3, well ahead of the other teams. Both. If you look at this is what I think was it Joel Klatt maybe. He went on a couple of radio shows last week complaining about this. He said that if you look at every loss point, one loss team, last week it was LSU. So this week the Big Ten has the highest one loss team in Michigan. SEC has the highest ranked team by multiple spots if you look at the other losses. 2-loss LSU is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spots against the second 2-loss team. 5 spots higher. And the second 2-loss team, SEC. So then you have to go 7 spots. LSU is ranked 7 spots higher than the next best non-SEC 2-loss team. At 3-loss teams, let's go with Florida like you said. They're 1, 2, 3 spots ahead of the next 3-loss team, Michigan State. And at that point, what are we looking at here?
And here's the other part. UCF, bump them up. Why are you saying – I don't understand this rationale that they can't play. When you look at what Boise State was able to do in the past, in the Fiesta Bowl, there's some of these smaller teams that have upsets in big bowl games. It happens. I think they deserve a seat at the table. It happens
all the time.
And I'm going to pound on the table until they get a seat there. Because there's nothing that they're doing. They're doing everything that you're supposed to do. They're playing Division I. They're scheduling teams, and they're winning. They beat Auburn last year, who beat the national champion. They beat Alabama. So they did it. They've done everything that they've asked for. They have the longest winning streak in the country right now. I don't see how you can continue just to force them down. And I don't understand why from week to week certain schools drop 1 or 2 spots and other ones just barrel roll out of the top 25. I don't know where the voting with that comes from. That you can see teams one week. Like, how is Texas ranked? Losing to Maryland, being a 3-loss team. Why are you in the top 25?
I'll throw that at you. If Michigan lost to Maryland, how far do you think we would have dropped? 20th?
I don't know.
They would have been calling for Harbaugh's head. ESPN would have had an article the next day about him going to coach Houston or something in the NFL, Indianapolis. They would have had it queued up because they always do.
Well, you look, and I know that at this point of the year, they don't deserve it, but Florida State loses to Virginia Tech first game of the year. And completely fell out of the top 25. Where if that was an SEC matchup, they may fall to the very bottom at 25, but they still keep them relatively ranked for the sake of relevancy.
Oh, I'll throw this out there. You have Wisconsin 6-3. They're 1-1 versus the top 25. Are they anywhere close to this ranking? No. You have Auburn in there. They're 1-2 versus the top 25. They haven't performed. Mississippi State, guess what? They're all 1-3 against the top 25. What 6 wins are quality of them? They have 1 quality win, the same amount as Wisconsin. And you know what Wisconsin lost was to Michigan. So it's not like they lost to a crappy 24 Auburn. They lost to a top 5 team. That's their only ranked loss. And sure, they dropped that one against BYU. But BYU, I don't think, I haven't looked at them for a while. I guess they're 4-5. I thought they had a winning record. But you're looking at that, and it's like, why are they out? You can't have, like, how many 8 3-loss teams ranked, including, what's this one? Washington, they're 1-0 versus ranked teams, which isn't right because they lost to Auburn, and Auburn's ranked now, so it looks like ESPN didn't update this. So these numbers could be way off. And then, who's the other one?
And with Auburn, I just saw their AD came out and said that Malzahn will be back for next year. So you can pretty much guarantee by the end of this year, Gus Malzahn's going to be fired, so he might as well start clearing out his desk. Because every time that an AD comes out and says he has our full support, the next day they're picking up their belongings and carrying it out to their car.
I thought you were going to make a Gene Chizik joke, but where they said, like, he won a national championship, he's for sure going to be around, and then they fired him.
There it is. I mean, it happens all the time. As soon as the AD gives the vote of confidence, it's, hey guys, you might want to get your resume ready.
Yeah, I mean, I'll go ahead. The only argument you can really make is to expand it, and I want to go right to 16. We've talked about it. I've thought about doing a write-up. We have some exciting things in the works, so definitely we're going to get back into this next week. You can help support the show within the next coming weeks, hopefully. But I'm going to look at expanding some of the stuff on our site, and that's one of the things I was going to actually put out the actual plan, because I put some of it on Twitter. If you follow us at S-Bound Sports, I had some people attack it, but then they couldn't disprove why it was a bad idea. The only thing I heard was, if you put in automatic qualifiers like UCLA this year, let's say they do make it at 6-7. What's the big deal? You just put them in the number 16 seed. Is Alabama going to be afraid to play a 6-7 UCLA? I don't understand how that would hurt the playoffs at this point. Let everybody in. I even put the numbers out. Most teams that have bad records don't win their conference championship game. Like, I don't know what the record was. I was going back through the years. Almost every playoff in my system where you have automatic qualifiers, and then you go, if you win the conference, you're automatically in, and then you go right down the polls. Get rid of this committee too. Get rid of it. Go back to the computer polls and get rid of ESPN's polls. You get MIT, University of Chicago, some big school out there, Caltech, to go ahead and put together their computers, and you do the average like they used to do. And I know people complained and said, well, it's too heavy. It's basically just looks at wins and losses. It can't be worse than this. It cannot be worse than this. And I did have one poll. Oh, crap. I didn't write the guy's name down. I think it was Jim Alexander or something like that. His AP poll for this week, just to show you how bad it was, he had Ohio State 4th. He had Michigan 7th.
Why not?
In what world were you watching both teams the last couple weeks as Ohio State put out a squeaker against a Nebraska team that Michigan had already blown out, and you thought, at home nonetheless, and you thought, oh, hell yeah, that was top 4 performance right there. There's no way that guy watched the game or looked up anything. He was out west. I think he's the UCLA, something with UCLA. I can just imagine that he's sitting there thinking, oh, I'll get Harbaugh. He'll come back to the NFL. Maybe he'll coach the Raiders. Maybe he's mad that he didn't go to the Raiders and they're stuck with Gruden rebuilding. Maybe he's a 49ers fan. He just hates him. But you can't look at the data right now. The number one defense crushing the last 3 ranked opponents they played and think 7th. We'll put Ohio State at 4th, though. So get rid of all these jabronis out there. And it makes me hate, like, people go back through and they're like, well, the only good national champion is if you use the AP pool. Okay, then use the AP pool. Whatever, but you can't tell me these guys actually know what they're voting for. And a committee's even worse. Committee is going to be even worse. So, that's all I have. You have anything else on this college football stuff?
No.
I think you just need automatic qualifiers. Are they afraid to play UCF? Because that's what I'm seeing. I want to see how would we know the Pac-12, even though they're beating each other up and they all have bad records, or the Big 12 for that reason? How do we know that their second or third team wouldn't run the table and win the national championship?
Well, you don't. And I think with UCF, their style and their tempo and things that they're doing is so different from the way that other teams are doing it that I think they deserve a shot, but you'll never see it unless they expand it.
I think they need to. I think what will happen, and this will be, I'll talk about some of the upgraded stuff, but I think what they need to do to expand it is, if they don't do it, you're going to see teams and conferences just don't care. If the Big Ten gets left out again in the Pac-12, when was the last time the Pac-12 was in the playoffs? Was it 2 years ago?
Last year or 2 years ago, with Washington getting throttled.
Yeah, and then the Big 12, they had it must have been 2 years ago, because Oklahoma was in it last year. So you have conferences that are in it, maybe every couple years. And then you have the Big Ten, which is like a weird, it honestly feels like the conference committee head just goes ahead and calls up Jim Delaney and he says, hey, who do you guys want me to take? You want me to take Penn State? They won the conference. He's like, nah, you guys know I want Urban Meyer in the playoffs. He could win the whole thing. We know James Franklin's going to embarrass us out there. So they're like, all right, your call. And then he called him. He's like, well, you got embarrassed 2 years in a row. You told us to pick Michigan State, then you told us to take Urban Meyer, so you guys can take a year off. Take a break. And then
go to your room and think about it.
Go to your room and think about it. Who you picking next time? And they still picked Ohio State, and they still lost. So this year it's like, hey, maybe they'll pick Michigan. That's I honestly think that's how the Big Ten picks their teams. They just call them up, and they're like, hey, all the ADs, I could just see them in a room huddled. They're like, who gives us our best chance to win? It's like, this year, Nebraska just almost beat Ohio State. It has to be Michigan. All right, let's call the refs up. And then they just call the refs up and they fix the game. It wouldn't even surprise me if that's how the Big Ten ran their meetings. Then you have the ACC. It's like, hey, who's reffing this game? They're like, we don't even know. We didn't hire anyone. We'll find someone. Just go ahead out there.
It's like, who do we win? Oh, Clemson. All right, we'll screw them. There you go, Pitt. Beat them.
I think this could be the year, because you have Clemson playing a super underwhelming opponent on their side. And then you have Michigan or Ohio State playing an underwhelming opponent. And then you have Washington State, possibly one loss, playing an underwhelming opponent. The only conference that does it right is Oklahoma in the Big 12. They're getting screwed because they have to play the next top-ranked team because they have that round robin. So they're either going to play Texas again or West Virginia right now. So double whammy. Not looking good for those guys. They're probably regretting that. The SEC also kind of screws you, but not if you stuff the ballots. Not if you go ahead and put all those teams up. But quick, before I get into the final bell, I wanted to mention for mine that, like I said, we've been improving the show. Got some exciting stuff coming. I know it's been a while. I've been doing some extra wiring at the studio. So for those that think, I know we switched where I have Matt up on the TV here. It's not because I'm like cutting him out or something. It's because of the way our stream was getting really, really choppy for the YouTube video that we upload after the show with a lot of freezing. So we've been trying to offload some of that from our computer to make sure we get the best quality stuff. And we're going to be upgrading our camera too over the next couple weeks. Came today, the stuff that I was missing, I just didn't have time to get that wired before the show. So keep looking for that stuff. We have some other exciting news coming down over the next couple of weeks. But that's basically all I got for this week. Matt, what do you got for the final bell?
Last thing was just the Chicago Blackhawks fired their coach.
Oh, I missed it on the NHL stuff. Good call.
And I was surprised that guy that took him to multiple cups got canned. But it just goes to show, if you don't produce, hit the bricks, because that pressure to win now and to win immediately is present in all sports.
Well, he won, 3 cups?
Yep.
So you have a coach, basically the Bill Belichick of hockey right now. And what do? You're like, yeah, fire him. But I think hockey and basketball kind of works like this. Once you're at that top level, do you really need a coach to do the X's and O's? No. I think you kind of just need a coach that just motivates your... Well, don't even get me started on Nick Saban, because I saw that he had his kids, that they have a couple... They're going to be underdogs against Mercer coming up. So they have to stay focused. Like, they're going to be underdogs. They're the number 1 team in the country. But I think in hockey and basketball, you just need to motivate them. And you have to be able to put your best lines together. It's kind of like baseball, where you make the lineup, and that's your thing. And then you have to insert the pinch hitter. And whenever you don't make the right call, it's more strategy. It's not so much about like football where you have a direct feel on the team. You're not going to be able to be like, hey, Andres Galarraga, I don't like how your batting stance is, and I'm coach. I'm going to have you do it this way. Like, baseball just doesn't work like that, and I think hockey and basketball are the same. You're not going to be like, yo, don't skate like that anymore. Come on. You need to be more physical. you got the guys. It is your job to just kind of put them together. Like, could you imagine, like, hey, Jose, quit taking those steroids. Like, we don't want you to hit power anymore. Go run a few sprints. You're our speed guy. You're leading off. Where in football, you can change that. You're like, shit, we need to go spread. We need to run some speed stuff. But these other sports, you don't do that. You're just more of like a manager instead of a coach. I think that's technically what it is. So, anything else?
No, I'm good.
All right, thanks for listening. Like I said, stay tuned. Tell your friends, Southbound Sports. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Southbound Sports, S-Bound Sports at Twitter. And make sure you subscribe to the show. Like I said, we do have a YouTube. I've been toying around with getting some more video stuff up on there. Jeff does his show on YouTube, but I've been putting it in the iTunes feed as well for those that don't have video. Spaces or Laces I've been putting up as a bonus episode in our iTunes feed as we're trying to get that consolidated. And we'll be making some more improvements. But thanks for listening, and we will see you next week.